it just confused me. I'm like, am I offering to double book myself, or is this the exact same thing that I already said yes to? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, and then was somebody was supposed to be here, you thought?
Well, I thought they said that Tori was going to be here 20 years. This is kind of the technology guy. But obviously we got that hooked up really well. So, but
Do you
if
think-
it's supposed to be live stream, I don't know how that.
Did we ever do the dice thing again?
Oh.
Did you want my clicker? Because it's already plugged in with that.
No, because, I mean, I'm gonna read off this last grade, so,
Okay.
being close by is not a big deal.
Not a problem.
But thank you.
Willing to share?
She's
it?
like a real professional.
I
She's
know.
killing it. Even had the adapter and everything, so. it's
Well, I
pretty
have a Microsoft Surface, and there are no ports on that, other than I have one charging port and two USB-Cs ports on there, and that's the only port that's on there. I think so, and so then I have that, like, when I showed up to work for the first day, the laptop was sitting on my desk, and that thing was sitting on my desk, so I figured it was a standard. Hello.
Is that up okay?
I think so. Got a microphone and a presentation, so.
Yeah, and I didn't know speaker or podium made more sense or so.
I just wanna be able to kinda like click through my slides, cause I have some stuff right there.
Sure.
That's okay?
Yeah, no, whatever. Take yourself at home.
Is it supposed to be streamed?
It is streamed.
So how do you do that?
It starts automatically at 5.
Oh,
If you're not rolling at 5, that's okay. But it's, you know, clip it, whatever. I think I'm gonna announce, we're gonna have a presentation starting in the auditorium just
Oh, yeah.
in case. So, yeah, hopefully you more will show up.
Story of our lives for years. You get great information, great speakers, because I'm Dr. Lee fan. I can start her fan club today, and nobody shows up.
I do think
Part of it could be the weather.
the-
Yes.
Yeah.
It does say, that is true.
Part of the power of this is it'll be streamed.
It
and
will
it'll
be, so
recorded,
people
and we
can always
Watch it
listen.
when they want.
Questions about, if there are questions.
Yeah, how do I see it on the live stream? Oh, I heard that I'm supposed to repeat questions.
Yeah.
I knew that.
So we won't be able, like, live stream questions won't be able to come in,
Okay, fair enough.
but if the audience has questions, just repeat them. Because we'll be heard.
So think about which questions.
Yeah, the ones that the people on live stream might be asking. Let's think about those.
There you go. What would you be wondering on live stream?
That capability we do not have,
Yeah.
the live stream engagement, we're not there yet.
Fair enough.
So, but we can set them to run automatically.
I just think it's awesome though that it's still an option, you know what I mean? Like, for all the down things that happened with COVID, being able to connect and be multiple places at one time has been benefit.
I'm gonna go announce,
All right.
Dr. Lee, topic,
Healthy growth in kids.
healthy growth. Okay.
Okay, well, looks like you're set. So
Yeah, thanks for showing me where to go.
good luck.
Thank you. Double spaced. Times New Roman. I think so. I don't know if we have any indication it starts though.
I have 4:59 right now on my Apple Watch, so.
I'll go with that.
That's how our board meetings.
Oh, sure. It's a nice auditorium.
Please excuse the interruption. In the high school auditorium, Dr. Lee is about to present on healthy growth and development for children. If you would like to attend that session, it is starting in about 1 minute. Thank you.
1 minute. If you are joining through live stream, we'll be starting in 1 minute. couldn't believe how nice it was walking out today.
I know,
Just
right?
gorgeous.
It's been a very February, March.
Yeah.
Weather.
This has just been a wonderful winter. Hello and welcome to today's presentation entitled Healthy Growth in Childhood. I'm Dr. Kelsey Lee, a family physician at Avera Medical Group in Sibley. This presentation is for educational purposes only. As always, talk to your doctor for an evaluation and treatment plan specific to you and your health. As I've said, I'm a family medicine physician, which means that I provide care for children and adults. For children, we offer wellness visits, which are typically annually for children and teenagers, and more frequently for babies and toddlers. I also provide care during acute illnesses for children between their wellness visits. I am a diplomate of the American Board of Obesity Medicine as well, which means that I have additional training and certification on treating obesity. Today we will be starting off by reviewing childhood growth in general, what's typically seen and what is atypical, and what may indicate the need for intervention. We'll talk about nourishing foods, identifying them, and integrating them into family lives in a practical way. We will talk about physical activity and other weight influencers. I have included some resources for families to utilize and recipe ideas. Lastly, we will be talking about, quite briefly, on medical weight management options, which can sometimes be indicated for pediatric obesity. During well-child visits, we measure the child's height, weight, and early in life head circumference. We ask questions regarding their diet, sleep, and depending on their age, their physical activity habits. We plot this information on a growth chart. These are standardized based on larger population studies, and they're also called growth curves due to their shape. Children's growth velocity is quick early on, which means that and then it slows down as they reach adulthood. There are special growth charts for certain patient populations, such as prematurity, dwarfism, Down syndrome, and obesity. These are growth charts for boys. The left is prior to 2 years of age. It's weight for length and head circumference for age. Head circumference is a surrogate marker for brain growth. Because brains are not fully formed when we are born, it actually continues to grow and develop throughout childhood and actually isn't finished maturing until about the mid-20s. The center image there refers to children older than 2 in regards to their weight and height stature. You can see where the growth is quite rapid early on and then slows as you reach the right side, which is nearing adulthood. The one on the right is a reflection of BMI, and remember that's just a calculation of weight divided by height squared. Girls have their own growth charts, as you can see by the color. We use this information to better understand whether the growth we are seeing is normal or abnormal. Underweight is less than 5th percentile, overweight is 85th to 95th, and obesity is 95th percentile for BMI or more. Normal is anywhere from 5th to 85th. There are specialized growth charts for patients with extra weight or pediatric obesity. The left reflects boys and the right reflects girls. In terms of being underweight, this could be related to a myriad of different conditions, growth stunting, and others. Ultimately, there's something potentially altering metabolic demand, intake of nutrients, or the absorption. This could be genetic disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, growth hormone deficiency, or many other conditions. Depending on the child, a doctor may advise blood work or radiography to better understand why a child might be underweight, and treatment is geared towards treating the underlying condition and optimizing a nourishing diet. Similarly, a child who's overweight can also be related to a myriad of reasons. Obesity is considered a chronic disease resulting in altered anatomy, physiology, and metabolism, which can affect the physical and mental health trajectory of kids. Obesity-related conditions can be seen in pediatric patients, such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, hepatic steatosis or fatty liver, worsening troubles such as asthma, sleep apnea, and joint problems. Pediatric obesity is affecting over 14 million children in our country, which is about 19%. In the 60s, this was about 5%. It took a pretty swift increase between the 80s and 90s, and it's just continued to rise to 19% today. There is racial discrepancies between this, so we'll see a higher rate with Hispanic children, around 26%, non-Hispanic Black children, around 24%, and non-Hispanic Asian children, around 9%, and non-Hispanic white children, 16%. Depending on the child, the doctor may identify their weight as overweight or obese, and then potentially advise lab work to understand an underlying cause or look for complications. This may mean checking liver function, blood glucose, or cholesterol levels. And depending on the case, the patient may be recommended to see a dietitian, try feeding therapy, make lifestyle changes, or even consider medication or surgery. So we'll dig into typical and atypical growth by age group and what practices are associated with normal growth based on age. So infants first, when we're born, the average baby weighs between 5 pounds 8 ounces to 8 pounds 13 ounces. Babies typically lose some weight in that first week with a gradual regain. They're often at their birth weight or beyond by 2 weeks of age. Each month they gain, or the initial month, they're gaining about 30 grams per day, and this slows by the second month to 20 grams per day. They'll actually double their weight by 6 months and triple their weight by 12 months. This is a very fast growth when you look at over a lifespan. For me to triple my weight in a year would be quite a feat, but for a baby, this is no big deal. Almost all nourishment comes from milk at this age group, although solids can be started between 4 to 6 months of age. We usually recommend fruits, vegetables, foods that are rich in iron and zinc, such as fortified infant cereals or pureed meats. As babies approach that 1 year mark, they may be eating more solids and be drinking less milk than they did at 6 months as they self-regulate their appetite. For babies and young toddlers, a pretty large percentage of their diet is coming from fat, which is critically important to support myelination, which is brain development and nerve development. This continues until about 2 years of age. Abnormal growth might look like rapid weight gain in the first 6 to 12 months. This does tend to be associated with obesity later in childhood and even in adulthood. We do see higher weights with formula-fed babies due to higher protein and energy intakes, resulting in physiologic differences, stimulating more fat deposition. Breastfeeding, where it is economically and emotionally and physically feasible, is typically recommended to be done exclusively. Other things that can help support a typical weight growth can happen prenatally, so avoiding processed foods prenatally actually helps promote normal growth in infancy, and then avoiding fruit juice in infants after they're born also helps. We'll move on to toddlers next. So toddlers are learning to move and play and speak and behave. They exert their independence more strongly, and their appetite and growth waxes and wanes, leading to day-to-day variance. So one day they eat a normal amount, the next day they hardly eat a bite, and then by the third day they're eating more than they normally would. They're eating to accommodate for their growth and physical activity, which varies day to day, so this variance makes total sense. Now, days when they're not eating as much can bring anxiety or even frustration to some parents. I do recommend trying to avoid a finish your plate mentality, as this is teaching them at a fairly early age to ignore satiety signals, which is essentially your natural off button. A good rule of thumb instead is that parents provide the food and children decide how much they eat, or the you provide, they decide. I recommend focusing on offering them a healthy selection of food, stuff that's rich in calcium and fiber, so fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans. I would recommend demonstrating your own liking for this food by eating it yourself. And remember that picky eating at this age is very normal. Keep offering the good stuff in different ways. It can take 7 to 11 exposures to a new food to decide that you like it. And with toddlers, they may like it 11 times, and the 12th time they don't like it anymore. You'll want to roll with resistance here and keep the experience positive and the pressure low. If seeing broccoli on the plate is always associated with a fight, they're not going to particularly enjoy broccoli, even if the taste is okay. Now, some children, particularly neurodivergent children, so maybe a child with autism, may benefit from feeding therapy if they have extreme aversion to certain foods, like due to their flavor, textures, or colors. Now, as toddlers transition away from infanthood, it's also important to transition away from milk-only diets. Milk definitely has protein, calcium, vitamin D, and fat, but it doesn't contain all the things that toddlers need. So this doesn't mean stop all milk, but it may mean cutting back for some kids. Between 1 to 2, we recommend no more than 24 ounces of whole milk in a day. Remember that whole milk is helpful because it's got that extra fat as they're working on that brain development at that age. At 2, they can switch over to a skim or 1% milk, and then they'll need even less milk, closer to 16 ounces per day. As they grow and get larger, that number gets bigger, so 4 to 5 is typically 20 ounces of milk. Iron deficiency anemia is actually a disease sometimes seen in toddlers where they're getting most of their nutrition from cow's milk alone. So the benefit of not following a milk-only diet in a toddler is you can promote hunger at meal times and avoid constipation and iron deficiency anemia. There's not actually a minimum for milk intake at this age. It's more get enough calcium. And we'll talk about more options here in a minute. So grade school children, these are kids between 6 and 12. So they're growing maybe 2 inches in height a year, maybe 2.5, and gaining between 4 to 7 pounds each year until puberty hits. The brain is still needing some fat to grow and develop appropriately, and their bones are needing a lot of calcium. So calcium is at its highest need in people between 9 to 18 years of age. Now, also, kids these age, socially speaking, are often able to make some more food decisions for themselves in the cafeteria and what to pack in school lunches. Some kids may decide to explore vegetarian options. Ultimately, you're just trying to make sure that they're getting adequate protein, calcium, carbohydrates, fats, and sodium without going overboard in some of those categories. Kids can also start having feelings about how they look or how they're growing at this age, so it's important to help your children or grandchildren understand that it's important not to look a certain way, but rather to fuel your body and keep their body active and strong. This goes into a little more about calcium needs. Essentially, most of your life, between 3 servings of calcium daily is fine, and between 9 to 18, it's usually closer to 4 servings daily. And you can see that there's dairy products that are heavier in calcium, but there's also protein, produce, like collard greens are really high in calcium, and different grains that are actually sometimes fortified in calcium. There have been studies showing a correlation between excessive soda pop and bone fractures, and it's not that they think the soda pop is causing the bone fracture, it's that the soda pop is replacing calcium-rich beverages like milk, and then you're seeing resulting fractures from the absence of that. So that being said, we'll move on to preteens and teenagers. So these kids are in a whirlwind of physical and emotional and social change as they go through puberty. From a physical standpoint, they will be experiencing more rapid growth. Girls is usually between 11 to 16, boys is slightly later, between 12 to 18. They do need more calories to accommodate this growth, and you want to make sure that those calories are coming from protein, calcium, healthy fats, and carbohydrates in moderation. You really want to avoid getting all those extra calories from foods that are low in nourishment, like fast food. Girls may also need extra iron during menstruation time periods, and boys may need calories and protein just in higher volumes than girls. This kind of separation you start to see around 9 years of age, where boys start needing higher numbers than girls do. Generally, we recommend no caffeine under 12, and really to avoid between 12 to 17 years of age. There are different sources and different practices and beliefs around this. There are some studies that will talk about a limit of up to 100 milligrams of caffeine between 12 to 17, but pretty much everyone has a hard no on energy drinks. There's studies showing energy drink consumption being linked to anxiety, hyperactivity, inattention, and poor decision making with negative impacts on sleep for kids. This is just to demonstrate that calorie need as it changes. You can see as they age, that's going to increase, and particularly from 9 and on, boys will need more than girls. Now, keep in mind that these are just general averages. So if your child is, for example, a high-performing athlete, they may need more calories than what's listed here. And although calories are far from the whole story, do keep in mind that if a child is eating 1,000 more calories than necessary, they can see about 57 pounds of unnecessary weight gain over the course of 10 years if this is consistent. So you're thinking, okay, 5 pounds a year, and they're only expected to grow about 4 to 7. So that's basically doubling their expected weight gain. And it is often, and it can be food that's not very nourishing as well. Now, just because eating too much can have some side effects, does not mean that they should over-restrict their calories as well. Children are growing important organs and muscles and bones, and they absolutely need calories to do this. So just as there's physical changes, there's emotional, cognitive, and social changes during this time period. You want to be supportive of these things. This newfound awareness can lead to some anxieties, particularly about body image. Remember that this is partly normal adolescent development and self-discovery, so demonstrate positive role modeling and open communication. If you are seeing anxieties about body image escalate, or if you're seeing changes in eating patterns, then make sure to talk about this with your doctor. Eating disorders are unfortunately common in this age group, although they can affect a person at any age. So we'll switch gears now for a nutrition pop quiz. And my audience here is going to be picked on. Is this a healthy food? Yep, okay. So apples are a fruit, which is good. Wait, but don't they have sugar in them? That's bad. But they have fiber. That's good. I think they're probably good. Okay. How about this one? Is this one good?
Not as good as the apple, but not as bad as other things.
Oh, very good. So I'm hearing that, it's got some good stuff, but maybe not as good as the apple. So potato's a vegetable, but it's got some starch, which is bad, but it's got vitamin A, which is good, but they're also in French fries. Doesn't that make it bad? And this one healthy or unhealthy? More unhealthy? Fair enough. So pizza's full of fat and carbs, processed meat, so you think, oh, it's got to be bad. But does pizza have to be unhealthy? And are you limited to never eating pizza if you want to be healthy? So I would encourage people here and the folks at home to move away from the dichotomy of good or bad. Really just focus on the nourishment that you're getting from the food you're eating. So nutrient-dense foods, they're the stuff with the vitamins and the minerals, and then the macronutrients you need, like fiber, protein, unsaturated fats. So why is that stuff good? Well, protein helps with muscle building. Fiber helps with fullness and bowel function. Healthy fats are great for keeping you full. And all those vitamins, those micronutrients, all are helpful with growth. These foods tend to be rich in things like lean meats, fish, whole grains, dairy, legumes, nuts, seeds, vegetables, and fruit. They tend to be whole foods that are fairly minimally processed. Now, the opposite of this is something nutrient sparse, where they've maybe added a lot of extra sugar or sodium or starches or trans fats, which don't serve your body as effectively as these other nutrients do. We hear a lot about, processed foods being bad, but you may have wondered what's so bad about processed foods. And to answer that, you really have to ask a more basic question: is what is a processed food? So any food that goes from its natural state, it's processed in some manner of adding substances to it, you will get a processed food. And you can change the nourishment of any food by processing it, but depending on the process, you might change it just a little, or you might change it a whole bunch. And that's how you can range from those unprocessed foods all the way to ultra-processed foods. So it's a busy slide, but stay with me. It's minimally processed foods are there on the left-hand side. So minimal processing is basically anything that just makes it safe for eating. So maybe you have a potato and you're cutting off the little tubers, or you're roasting something or crushing it or freezing it, pasteurization. These are all basic maneuvers that just optimize eating the substance. The next column there is processed ingredients. So these have a little more processing, but particularly pretty limited. So things like honey, maple syrup, vinegar, salt. Processed foods is just combining the first two columns. Now, these should be contrasted with the final column, which is your ultra-processed foods. These foods are fundamentally different because they involve some kind of industrial processing where there's added sugars or starches or hydrogenated fats, hydrolyzed proteins, cosmetic additives, stabilizers, gelling agents. So if there's techniques involved that you can't do at home, like blasting hydrogen into your fats, that probably means that it's a pretty processed, industrialized food. Foods that are like this are soda pop, margarine, cereal, hot dogs, packaged cookies, fast food. So take that potato again, right? So potato, it was hard to tell. Was it going to be good or bad? So we start with a minimally processed. We took off the little tubers, we cleaned them up, and they're minimally processed there on the left. And we're going to add maybe some olive oil, salt, and pepper. The processed food, it comes in when you add all of it together and you bake it. So in a half cup, you have about 58 calories. It's probably a little bit more fat than that with the olive oil, but fairly low in regards. And you do get like the vitamin A and C. Now take a different potato. Now this potato, you're going to wash, peel, cut, blanch. You're going to add color additives before being flash fried and frozen, and then refried later and covered in salt. So there's actually one popular fast food chain that has 10 total ingredients to make French fries, and 5 of them are different kinds of oils. And keep in mind that all of this processing and all these changes, they change the nutrition of the food. So for example, that same half cup of a potato goes from 58 calories to 238 calories. That's way more energy added to it because of this extra additional processing. The fat content has gone 10 times. And remember, fat has about 9 calories per gram, so you don't need to add a ton of fat to add a lot of extra energy that maybe you didn't need. Carbohydrates there, that's multiplied times 3. There is a slight increase in protein. And you dropped out all those vitamins. So the more processing you do, the higher energy you're getting from it, and traditionally with less vitamins involved. Now, the reason this is significant is that the body changes. It has a different reaction to ultra-processed food than it does to normally processed food. So we've got all these neurotransmitters and neuropeptides and hormones that are all working together to give us our fullness and make us hungry. Dopamine is a big one of these, and it can actually affect multiple parts of your brain and help you decide what foods you enjoy or crave. And with repeated triggers, the response goes down. So the resulting behavior is that the larger portions are required for the same satisfaction. So to have that same satisfaction you did from the first time you had French fries, you need a larger portion because that dopamine response has been dysregulated or downtrended. And then those with extra insulin resistance, which is common with people with extra weight, they can get more fat deposition from the exact same food because of their higher hormonal response. Calories from ultra-processed foods are very easily absorbed as well. So like a normal food, it might take 10 calories to break it down. Processed foods would require minimal because they're kind of processed for you. The problem with that is your overall intake and calorie intake at the end of digestion ends up being way higher. So what these foods do is curb hunger to some degree, but it stifles the appetite for more nourishing food at the same meal. And it can also funnel addictive processes and promote cravings without promoting that nourishment. They actually did a study looking at this where they had 2 groups, and each group was offered either ultra-processed foods or just unprocessed foods. And they had them eat that way for about 2 weeks. The only rule is that they just had to stop eating when they were full. And then after they did kind of a washout period, and they reversed the 2 groups. And when they did, both groups demonstrated the same behavior. They ate about 500 calories more when they were eating ultra-processed foods to get that same satisfaction, which is pretty startling. Now, are all processed foods bad? Nope. Some foods are fortified with nutrients to prevent deficiencies. So iron-fortified cereals for infants can help prevent anemias, and vitamin D fortified milk helps prevent rickets. Generally, the shorter the ingredient list, especially if it's 2 or 3 components, the better it is. So is there anything we can learn from processed foods? I would say yeah. Ultra-processed foods are often a mastery in presentation and flavor and color to keep people, especially kids, interested. Now, you can use this to your advantage in your kitchen, especially those with more limited palates, meaning that they're a little bit pickier. You can add color, flavor, and interest to your own plates in the kitchen. There are a few habits that help promote healthy eating in general. So family meals being prioritized together at home, and then involving the family in that meal planning. So collaborating on meals and entrees and sides. You can bring those children to the store, and maybe younger kids, you can have them pick this week's vegetable. This is also a great opportunity to teach through cooking. You can learn math, science, vocabulary words, planning projects, creativity. You do want to be mindful of safety in the kitchen, especially with younger children, particularly with heat and sharp objects. One helpful practice to reduce ultra-processed food is just to broaden the palate and keep in mind that there's a very natural anxiety that comes from eating unfamiliar foods. This was actually really adaptive for us as humans once upon a time ago. Depending on the food, it may take several joyful experiences to overcome that anxiety, and it may not start from food tasting. It might come from food smelling, or washing the vegetables, or tearing up the lettuce, or tasting it while you're cooking. When it comes to trying a new food, particularly for little ones, and especially when the food has a strong new flavor, use it in small amounts, and if it's not delicious yet, wait a little while and reintroduce it, maybe a week or two. And try to combine it with unfamiliar foods with familiar foods. And use sauces to help bridge flavors. Crossing a food bridge is a technique that's one of the techniques in feeding therapy, and it helps by having you introduce a similar food that a child already likes, and then having them try something that's similar to it. So a child who loves pumpkin pie, you might try mashed sweet potatoes. You can increase or decrease the level of sweetness with some honey or cinnamon, and then as that gets more tolerated, then you can try mashed carrots. These little things can help kids broaden their palates so they're more acceptable to other things, particularly vegetables. Another helpful habit is mindful eating. So eating slowly and focusing on your food and enjoying them in the moment, putting your fork down between bites and sitting with your family in your busy lives. You do want to avoid watching screens while eating. There will be additional talks on screen use actually tomorrow with one of my colleagues. Another pop quiz. Are you ready? All right. How many ways are there to prepare a cauliflower? Options are A, quick, 0, quick, throw it away. B, 2, C, 7, or D, more than 10? D, oh, very good. You guessed correct. There are at least 11. There's actually probably more ways to prepare cauliflower. Essentially, you can use it like a potato, a pizza crust, rice, hash brown, steak, salad, buffalo wings, actually, which is actually really good. Nachos. And cauliflower is not the only vegetable that can be prepared creatively. Now, if your family day wasn't filled with all the most amazing and nourishing food and drink at every turn yesterday, that's okay. Most habits start small and they take consistency over time, not perfection. Look forward and not behind. Is there something for your next meal that could be more nourishing? Be patient with yourself and your children with this process. Don't chase perfection. It's just food. There are a number of other healthy body influencers. Physical activity is a big one. We usually recommend kids get at least an hour of physical activity a day and to generally avoid sedentary time. Organized sports, recreational swimming, family bike rides, dance parties, stretching breaks, all of these are great ways to keep our body moving. Adequate sleep is greatly important to helping maintain weight long term, so make sure your kids are getting enough of it. Mental health and adequate stress management is another huge factor, so be a support for your children and grandchildren in this area. As an extension of this, keep in mind that people who are underweight or who have extra weight often experience weight bias, so make sure to check your own bias in this matter and be supportive of your children and encourage others to do the same. Lastly, advocate for your schools and communities to have adequate access to healthy food options that are safe, and as well as safe, engaging outlets for physical activity. I did want to touch just briefly of what pediatric weight management commonly looks like. It's a 4-stage model, and each stage just gets more intense depending on severe cases. Usually stage 1 is prevention stage. 5210 rule is a common one I'll talk about in wellness visits. Stage 2 often includes other members of the team, like a dietitian, physical therapist, mental health provider, and usually includes some kind of planned diet and activity. Stage 3 is a lot like stage 2, but there's a little bit difference in the diet planning, and then there's a lot more family involvement. Stage 4 is usually done at a tertiary center and has a multidisciplinary approach, and it may even include medications or surgeries. Now, medications are approved for children 16 or older, or for children 12 and older. So I have listed family resources on this slide. First Five referral is a program that can be utilized through your primary care office, but specifically for children birth to 5. Chop Chop magazine subscription is really cool. It's made by the American Academy, or it's reviewed by the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it has a lot of recipe ideas for families to cook and eat together. It's very colorful and fun. The AAP sponsors the healthykids.org, which is a very patient-friendly website that also has recipe ideas, and then choosemyplate.org is the government's version of it. They actually have really good budget-friendly food ideas when people are on SNAP benefits. Sliding down a little bit, Danielle Binns is a family nutritionist and considers herself a picky eating expert, which has a lot of really good content. The Ellen Slaughter Institute is like the one down from there. That one is particularly good for toddler feeding if you're struggling with that. For teenagers, there's a great podcast called Lifestyle for Teens. It's made by a pediatric endocrinologist who is obesity certified and has some really great content. And then at the bottom there, if you are someone who is a Twitter follower, you can follow Dr. Fernando, or Dr. Yum is her other name, for her nutritional content. So in summary, we talked about normal growth and atypical growth, what practices are associated with each, how to recognize and broaden exposure to nourishing foods, and then we talked briefly about other healthy weight influencers. We also talked about medical management and family resources. So if you're someone wondering about your child's growth, I recommend scheduling an annual wellness visit. If you're looking for additional support on nutrition, you may ask your doctor or consider visiting with a local dietitian. Thank you for listening to me today on healthy childhood growth. Any questions?
I have one.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so in effort to get more variety of nutrients into picky eaters,
Yeah.
are you in favor or not in favor of like pureeing food to add to other food?
Oh, sure. So the question was, are we in favor of adding pureed food to other foods in an effort to get kind of broadening the palate? And I think that's fine. I think taking something and making it very small is a great way to introduce it without it being an overwhelming flavor. I think that's like kind of the first step. That's probably as small as you can go. And if you get a little bit bigger where maybe they can even see a little bit of it in there and recognize like, hey, this still doesn't taste that bad. Can also be a great way. So I think for any kid, you kind of got to meet them where they're at. You get a sense of like what they like, what they don't like, and then whether it's blending it, cutting it up into small pieces, putting it on the side, just having them involved with preparation. I mean, all those things can just introduce them a little bit more. Maybe they just smell it, you know what I mean? Like you just have to meet a kid where they're at and just try a few things. Yeah, great question. All right, we don't have any more questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and have our next speaker talk. Oh, our next speaker will be at 6 o'clock.
Do you want the scary thing with that? Okay. So about a year ago, I did a vape education at a dental office upon their request, and digging in and getting a little bit more oral health information on this. So the components of the e-juice, the appropriate glycol and like those types of things, did you know that they wear the enamel down? So they eat at the enamel on the teeth? So not only are they eating on the enamel, they also induce dry mouth. which then it reduces the saliva, so then you don't have the saliva that's constantly cleaning the teeth. And we're talking about this in this dental thing, and all of a sudden, one of the things is, and this is the group of, this is targeted towards impacting the population that is more likely to go after sodas and energy drinks. So then it's like, not only is the vape decreasing oral hygiene in general, but then it's increasing their
Sugar
lifestyle
and
is
all that
increasing.
bacteria
Yeah.
that is feeding off of it and not getting killed by the normal environment.
Correct. And if they have dry mouth, then they're more likely to want to drink it
something.
and not necessarily running towards water for that.
Sure.
Yeah, so it was just like all of a sudden they started spitting like crazy, and they're like, this is a vicious cycle. And I'm like, yeah, kind of seems like it. How does it? I believe that. Yeah. But it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and, okay, I have a question, and I don't know how much truth there is in this, but it seems like that happens popping up about, and maybe it's because there's so many things available in plastic bottles,
Mm.
but what do you,
Like microplastics and stuff?
yeah, like, I'm reading that this is starting to become a problem. They're finding these
In our blood.
plastics in our blood.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know that they've got enough information out there about like the long-term consequences from it, but it's one of those that you're like, that doesn't sound great.
I know, so I didn't know if you
I
had.
haven't seen those, like I said, I think
Much on
it's
that.
early enough that they've seen it and they're like, whoa, like this is more significant than I thought it was. But I think time is one of the biggest indicators. It's like they need enough time and build-up to know when it's gonna be an issue. It doesn't sound good, it doesn't, I mean, you never want to test it, but.
But in general, like the FDA would be one of the organizations that would start regulating that, and they're not going to do. They're a very data-driven organization.
Yeah, it's always,
And-
reactionary.
Yeah, and so they're not going to do anything preventative. It's all going to be like after it's been observed for like 20 years and they have sufficient data so they don't get sued, then they'll
Will
pull
they
it.
say something? Yep.
Yeah, because I get asked that all the time. Where it's like, if we know that the vape industry is particularly targeting our youth, and we know that it has substantially more nicotine, like and all this other sort of stuff, they're like, why isn't somebody stopping it? Well, the FDA is really the only one that can, but there's not enough significant data on it.
Because
It's been around for 16 years.
I mean, I'm sure they went through the exact same thing with tobacco. I mean, for a long time that was touted as healthy for factors, you know, and until there's enough data that even if you get sued, like you have to be able to compete.
Correct. Otherwise, it will negate anything else you try doing in that effort. So they want to make sure that their effort is like good and smooth. And that's like really hard from my standpoint of view because one of the things, like Brian King is the head of the tobacco division with the FDA, Dr. Brian King. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but we were on a webinar with him a handful of months ago. And he was talking about like, so right now there's a proposal and it's in, I can't remember what stage within the government it's in, but it's passed through like one or two weeks or whatever like that, and so now it's like one or two left to go for it to be like a national law or whatever. But they're in the process of banning menthol cigarettes. And not criminalizing people that are using it, but essentially the tobacco companies can't manufacture it anymore, and establishments cannot sell it anymore because of the limit to all this stuff. Okay, right? So the menthol in cigarettes. So he was talking about that, and we're like, okay, that's great, you're finding me. Also, menthol is related social determinants of health because your different ethnicities, mental health patients, females, stuff like that are way more likely to consume menthol products than any other demographics that are out there. So it is also an FDA or governmental attempt to right a wrong, especially for the African American population. Okay? And so we're all okay, that's great and everything, but then he said the next thing that they're looking at doing is limiting the amount of nicotine that is allowed in cigarettes. And all these hands started going out like, okay, cigarettes and vapes, right? He says, no, we're still waiting on all the information about vapes and how the nicotine content of vape is going to impact somebody. He's like, but we have the data on the cigarettes, so we're going after it. Like, and I'm like, but a vape has like 3 times the amount of nicotine as a cigarette does. And I'm like, why does it matter? But he's like, because the delivery method, the research looks at also the delivery method. So the delivery method, and I'm just like, are you kidding?
Sure, yeah.
Because it's the same thing.
Because if they go to court, they'll argue, lawyers will argue and they'll pay up and down because that's their money.
Yeah.
They're not going to.
Because it's the same thing with menthol, you know, like how they're So like the people that are using it don't always even know that it has menthol in it. And it's just like, so you're gonna do it in that group, but then now we're having these other menthol products over here, so I'm like,
And completely ignore that.
I know.
Deception,
It,
you know.
it is, it's a
It is
lot of,
deception.
it's very
Yeah.
twisted.
Yeah, so corporate.
Mm-hmm. We're padding the money. They don't care who gets sick, they don't care what issues you guys now have to deal with. Have you like seen any of like the vaping related like lung injuries or anything like that?
No, I don't think not like the big, I mean, I think the ventilator associated, like the vaping
Mhm.
ventilator associated one was like crazy, that was,
Yeah.
but I never actually saw it. You heard cases of it, and you're like, oh god, that's awful.
Yeah.
But I definitely see tons of vaping juice though,
Mhm.
you know. And you think about all the ramifications of that just starting at an early age. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about like affecting the brain development, their
Mhm.
mental health.
Yeah, I work in 5 counties and I have schools that are primarily having problems with predators right now, which are 10 and 11-year-olds. And if you really think about it, like go back to our generation. Yeah. But go back to our generation. And you know, I mean, I know we're 3 different age groups here, but how many 5th or 6th graders did you knew smoked?
I mean, you knew like probably the handful of like the naughty kids. That did
Yeah.
it. You know what I mean? But it wasn't like
But not really at 10 or 11. At 13 or 14 maybe, but
Sure.
not really at 10 or 11, right? There was maybe like one kid in your entire school that maybe did it at 10 or 11. And now it's like, listen, I have schools that have suspended 5 or 6 or 7 fifth graders in a single semester. You know, because they were caught doing it here. Not that they were using it in general, but that they were caught using it at school. So it's like, yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things. It's crazy how fast it's gone.
Yeah. I guess I also look at things like even just, you know, whenever you think about age, you're doing it, and that addiction is already there. And now we're seeing it as well. And if we really haven't had the money for it, and now we see the behaviors start because they have their children urge
Right.
the addiction. I mean, it's just such a huge circle of this is causing
Leading to
this.
this.
Yes, and then I'm glad you also mentioned it about, and I'm gonna listen back to this because I wanna get it really right and jot it down so I can remember it too. But we have seen such a rise in anxiety for kids.
Mhm.
How many did you brought up, Dr. Lee?
Ultra processed foods,
Yes.
vaping. I mean, those are all things that
Yes.
like excessive caffeine.
And I guess one thing that I was waiting for you to hit on there when we were talking about some of that was you hear it here and there, but I don't know a ton of research on it. And not only is it ultra processed, but it's with the different dyes.
Yeah.
You know, like the red dye, like you know,
Yeah, the data isn't as strong with the red dye stuff.
Okay.
So there's like, I don't know, sometimes it gets a little bit tough because there's a lot of like story information on it. I feel like there's people who absolutely swear that their ADHD was caused by like a, you know, a red dye
Mhm.
and they like never use a red dye anymore.
Mhm.
But it's, I don't know that they've got great data support. You know what I mean?
But let's be honest, if somebody's claiming red dye food because they're swearing that their ADHD was caused by that, good for them. Because I mean, is it something we really need in our life anyways?
No,
It's
no.
like, it's a fun little
Right.
bonus here and there, but it's not.
Yeah,
like-
It's hard process.
It's literally not a food.
No.
It's edible, but like dirt's edible, but you don't eat dirt.
But I
Like,
don't
But I
either.
mean, I just kind of was looking for, like, I was waiting for you to hit on, like, yeah, in between the dyes and then also the chemical flavorings. You know, so like
the
your
added
things-
sugars and the starches.
Yeah, or, well, not just that, but like, you know, in your sodas, okay, so you have strawberry soda, or you have grape soda, well, that's not actual that's a
Right,
chemically,
all
like a
artificial.
lab-created artificial flavors, you know, things of that nature, but I thought it was really, really interesting, one thing that hit me was when you were talking about like your ultra-processed, did you honestly tell us that you can build a tolerance to ultra-processed foods, which then makes it so you need and want more
Yes.
to have the same amount of
Yes.
dopamine?
Doesn't that sound familiar to some other drug that
Yes,
we talked
it
about?
does.
Yeah.
It does, but I was just, I almost
Maybe
like
like
was
that
like,
feeling
I was like, were you talking about tolerance to like food stuff? they hit it on the nose because they realize from a marketing standpoint of view, we have a huge demographic of people that have already built a tolerance to this, and so let's offer them a larger size of it.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Let's get
and
more
it's
addicted to
adopted.
it.
I mean, it comes
Yeah.
down to
Exactly.
it,
Spend
it's
more
kind of
money with this.
Yeah. But no, I'm like, that is like absolutely,
It's all generated.
I know, which is like, I mean, where's the people that are here for humanity?
I know.
You know, right?
There's the do-gooders, the bleeding hearts,
Right? Yeah. Okay, so then I just thought of another question. So we were talking about that. You mentioned about like the preteen female needing like iron.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So like what would be good ideas or options for them to add in iron so that they don't end up with
Anemia or something.
anemia or yeah, or just and isn't there a sort of thing too with early with like newer menstruation sort of thing? Somebody told me one time that they're that like they can almost have like a situational anemia that kind of ebbs and flows with their cycle. Is that true?
Yeah, there's people that only take an iron supplement during their menstruation, and then they don't have to take it because they have an iron deficit.
Okay.
So, you can do that with a supplement or iron-rich foods. If it's just a mild decrease, so like flow isn't crazy. I mean, there's some people that have a normal flow, there's people that have higher flows, but definitely ones with higher flows, eating more iron-rich foods would be good. Like spinach is a really good iron-rich food. A lot of like the dark leafy greens have a lot of iron in them.
Mm-hmm.
And then like your red meats, they generally have more iron in them, but you'll get it from other proteins as well. So you can get it from vegetables, supplemented, so a variety. Mostly it's fun stuff that you like.
But then it's awesome that iron though, having an iron deficiency, that increases, correct me if I'm wrong, brain fog and overall physical fatigue as well too, right? So that you start feeling like you're, when you're running or doing stuff, it's like your legs feel heavy. And so you just don't feel as like productive and things of that nature too, right? Which I mean, how many of us have been there where it's like you've been in the middle of yours and you're like, I just want to crash and burn. Like,
Yeah,
I just wanna-
you're like, there's a reason for
You
that.
know, and so
You
you're
have
like,
literally less blood.
yeah, and we need more iron.
Yeah, pretty much.
Some of that stuff though too, I'm kind of almost wondering, it's like, why have we not made some of this stuff general knowledge? You know what I mean? Like, why do we have to make an appointment with our pediatrician and have them repeat this over and over again? Like some things, like, I don't know, a couple years ago, I got my master's in wellness, and one of the classes was talking about when you do like NSAIDs, whatever, so you're over the counter like anti-inflammatories, like Advil, that sort of stuff, or like that, right? It prohibits different metabolism within your body for like muscle. And I'm just like, okay, do you know how many people that are runners or weightlifters or like do any of that sort of stuff? They have these aches and pains and they start taking this. Well, they're actually being counterproductive because their body can't metabolize and repair muscle. Like protein can't break down protein or synthesize protein as well, which is needed then to repair that muscle that they just challenged in the past. Well, they were either running a lot or weightlifting a lot. And I'm like, do you know how many people are probably running around in circles because this isn't common knowledge?
It's kind of crazy how many like over-the-counter things that you can get that can disrupt your healing from that, you know. But no one thinks about it or no one talks about it.
Yeah.
And like you think Tylenol and ibuprofen, like they're always like presented similarly, but really like Tylenol has way less risks associated than ibuprofen. You think about reflux, you think about kidney disease, all sorts of
I was
stuff.
doing with my computer.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And like ready to go for this real thing. How long? Look that up. And, yeah. So you were saying, okay, so what's related to kidney disease?
NSAID.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the kind of the more common one.
Well, this, I had somebody tell me years ago. I was running half marathons right after I had my first child. I had a friend challenge me, and I thought, oh, this will be a good thing to like manage the baby weight and everything like that. So 6 months and 2 days postpartum, I ran my very first ever half marathon. It wasn't pretty. I think I had like a 15.5-minute mile or whatever, but I ran in Vegas. So it was a night race. They closed down the strip. You ran the strip, whatever like that. And
That was really nice.
it was pretty cool experience, right? So then the last 2 or 3 miles that I'm running, I just have to reassure myself that it's not there and it's all in my head and, all this other sort of stuff. And then I had somebody just like literally go nuts on me one day about how like you're ruining their kidneys by taking that and then running. And I'm like, wait, what?
No one told me that.
I know. That was what it kind of came down to, but I was like, oh, I guess, okay, good information, thank you. I don't know why we don't talk about this more often, but.
I think one of the things that worries me is families that are cooking with each other more. Just, my kids are like people around the table for a meal.
That's how we grew up.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm older than both of you guys, so, I mean, you all sat down around the table, and you tried what came to the table.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, I don't like this, Mom, eat with something different, and I think we are starting to see too much of that, but I do like what you were talking about, making those foods available to them to
Yeah.
try and let them experiment and chew on this and discover and.
Especially when you do it from a young age, like, it's a lot harder to introduce that stuff when they haven't eaten it in a kid.
Right.
But do you know what changed a lot of that? For disrupting the family dynamic of sitting down and eating and exploring and discovering stuff like that? Extracurricular activities.
Sure.
Yes.
And the
Sure.
demand that
Because
we
we don't
went
have
from
time.
allowing like middle school kids to practicing a sport 1 or 2 days a week to now all of a sudden you have to be married to it 5 days a week or you're not good enough.
Yep. Preach.
So, I mean, that's a huge,
Yeah, when you have an extracurricular thing every day, like it just, it's way too intense. Like
It's too much, and
It's
we
too
wonder why we
much.
have kids with anxiety. We wonder why we have stressed out parents who are going higher now.
all my nurse's grandchildren or grandbabies were cheerleading and they're little, they're like 5 years old. And she was doing that for this basketball game, and it wasn't going to start until like 8 o'clock. It's like,
It should be a bed.
It should be a bed, and like even like the my boys by 8 o'clock, like you gotta be winding down pretty soon, don't you? Like and they have games like all night or something.
I think another thing that is just such a huge thing that parents society doesn't think about is the importance of sleep. Just that importance of sleep, that they don't see how important it is. And too many kids their sleep is disrupted and their parents don't know it because they're taking devices in their bedroom and having fall asleep.
They always fall
do
asleep.
you know how many parental controls you have the
Yes.
ability to put on your kid's phone and most parents don't realize that? Like I have a 12-year-old, she has a phone because we live in the country, and so we did that, whatever, but at Verizon, when we got her the phone, they helped me set it up, whatever like that, and so it's like, she has like 4 or 5 emergency contacts, she can only text or call those after a certain time, it shuts down all her apps, it shuts down her Wi-Fi, it shuts down, like she can't get on, it's like Fort Knox, which I'm kind of like, why is this a struggle bus here? Okay, now I got it.
For anybody tuning in online, we will be starting the What Adults Need to Know About Youth and Nicotine presentation in approximately 4 minutes.
Are you saying it? Okay, that's not a problem.
Do you have a handout?
I'll give you that too. Yeah, so this is from, I believe this is the CDC, yes, CDC handout there, and so it's more on like kind of parent education and information. So I'll cover some of the stuff on here, but obviously too, like a chunk of it is extra information as well too. It just kind of supports and extra resources and things of that nature.
What are some of the rates,
Like,
like in the US,
okay,
Iowa or something?
so Iowa, right now we're at about 16% middle school and high school. 16, yeah, ages, for middle school and high school. If you're not staying, I'll kind of let you know too then. This last year is, we're noticing high school is actually trending down, has dropped about 2% if you're only looking at high school. Unfortunately, the middle school is trending up compared to last year. In Iowa, we're still about 2.5% to 4%, just depending upon what surveys you're looking at, above the national average. You know, so I think that's what we're probably looking at, just like regular medical trends too, where they start on the coast and just like fashion too, work their way in. That maybe we're seeing some kind of headway and stuff on some of those coastal territories or states and things of that nature, and just a matter of time before they're kind of working their way in. But right now they're telling us in the United States that's 2.8 million middle schoolers and high schoolers are vaping on a regular basis. So, and if I go over to the kids too, what that equates out to is 1 out of 7. Yeah. And so like, you know, we hear kids tell us all the time, well, everybody else is doing it. So like you feel like you need to, everybody's doing it. Well, I say
6 and 7 are?
yeah. 6 out of the 7 aren't for everyone that is, you've got 6 that aren't, so like, yeah.
I would hope there'd be more that aren't.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, but heavens forbid about that.
Well, I mean, here's the thing though too, is like, you know, right now, I mean, we're still very, very focused on vapes, but, from the Iowa Tobacco Division, we're starting to put our mindset radar on is pouches are a huge thing. I'll talk about that a little bit too. So those are becoming more and more popular, but there's also, some new emerging products that are out there. Nicotine gummies, so just like the THC gummies.
Yeah.
They look like candy, nicotine, and also, beverages, especially energy drinks that are adding, nicotine infused, yeah, where they're adding that to it too. So it's like, it's gonna be one of those things where they have more stuff that we need to be looking for and watching out for. Yeah, so I mean, especially, that's one of my first couple slides is the challenge to change the dialect and the conversation from just tobacco to nicotine to all its products. Yeah. So, okay, 6 o'clock, so we should go ahead and good luck. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Angela Loutsch. I am a health educator through Community Health Partners. We're Sioux County's public health department, but I work underneath the Iowa Division of Tobacco. I serve Plymouth, Sioux, Lyon, O'Brien, and Osceola counties in youth prevention and encouraging cessation at any age. So today we're going to talk about what adults need to know about youth and nicotine. We're going to spend quite a bit of the time focusing on vaping since that's a huge issue that we're seeing a lot about. So right up here on the screen is my contact information. If you have any questions, you need any of these resources, please, please, please feel free to contact me. Otherwise, Mrs. Hannah Earl, that is in the middle school here, has my contact information. We do a lot of stuff together. I'm in her 5th and 6th grade classes right now for this term, so she can always put you in touch with me as well too. Okay, so our topics we're going to cover today is going to be tobacco and nicotine, pouches, numbers, so who's using what are our demographics, why youth are turning towards vapes, the impact on the brain and the body, what these items contain, where they're getting them and where they're storing them, as well as a call to action. So what can we as adults do to help our youth? So what have we been teaching our kids? For decades upon decades, we've been talking about tobacco. Most of us can probably say that we grew up learning that tobacco can kill you, it's harmful, it's addictive. But how much are we talking about nicotine? And the reason why we say that is a lot of these products that our youth are turning to right now are labeled as tobacco-free. And they have that vigilance in their head that this is a safer alternative because it's tobacco-free. And we've all been taught for decades the danger of tobacco. So now we need to here's our challenge to shift that conversation to either solely on nicotine or adding nicotine into that conversation to get especially our youth to understand that. So the biggest thing here is I want to remind is our smoking rates are at an all-time low in this country. So our youth are listening on the tobacco. So if they're listening to that, I think they're going to listen to the nicotine. So here's our challenge right now to add that in. So nicotine delivery methods, there's 3 main categories in which people are consuming nicotine. The first one's combustibles, that's what we're most familiar with. These are all tobacco products, and those tobacco leaves contain nicotine. We're really not gonna spend very much time on those at all today. Our second category is the aerosols. So those are your vapes, your ENDS, which stand for electronic nicotine delivery systems, your heat no burn systems, those types of things. So all of these produce an aerosol. It's not a smoke, it's not a harmless water vapor, it's an aerosol. They do not have tobacco in them, so they are listed as tobacco-free, but they are loaded with nicotine. We'll explore that in another couple slides. And then our third category is the smokeless category. So these are items that are gonna sit in the gum or the mouth. Some of them are gonna contain tobacco, some of them are only going to contain nicotine. So let's be clear, there is no such thing as a tobacco product that is considered safe, especially for our youth. I have kids ask me all the time, Angela, what's safer, smoking or vaping? And to me, that's like somebody asking me, what's safer, riding on the hood of a car or riding on the roof of a car? Is there a third option? Can we just ride inside the car? So we're gonna explore this a little bit more today. So we don't wanna sit here and say like vaping's safer. There's still a ton of risks with it because it still contains nicotine. It still contains a lot of other cancer-causing chemicals that we're gonna get into. So pouches, I'm gonna spend a little bit of time here on these. These are the next big thing. So if you already have your radar and your mindset on vaping, also be aware and vigilant on pouches. They're a smokeless product that just sits right inside the gum line there. They are labeled as tobacco-free, so once again, we have a lot of youth telling us, well, it's a safer alternative because it's tobacco-free and tobacco is the harm. Not necessarily. They're very easy to conceal. They don't need to spit with them, so they actually are gonna swallow that flavoring. That flavor and nicotine lasts for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then after that it has no real taste or whatnot, so they're usually disposing of those. They come in lots of flavors, and if you look at the container on the screen here, it looks a lot like some of our standard mint containers that we're used to, like our icebreaker mint and stuff. So a lot of times, youth in particular, they're gonna peel the labels off of those, and they're gonna be stored looking just exactly like that. So if we're seeing these around, it means that they're present in there. Keep your eye on those. They also tend to have high nicotine content. So one of our late studies or most recent studies that we just found within the last couple of weeks is that these can have about twice as much nicotine in them as the average vape does, which is a little bit concerning as well too. They're also have increased in sales by 600% between the year 2019 and 2022. So in a 3-year time period, their retail sales have increased by 600%. And I think the scariest stat that I've seen is that 73% of youth that have ever tried them are still using them. So because of that massively high nicotine level in them, the addiction rate is happening at a faster rate. Here's a timeline of nicotine products in the United States. Cigarettes became mass produced in the United States in about 1880, and the first vape hit the market in 2007. And it's no coincidence that that first vape looked like a cigarette, because these were originally created as smoking cessation aids to help adults that were smoking cigarettes quit smoking cigarettes. They didn't really work as that, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But this slide, there's a couple things I want you to take away. The first one is in 2012, something massively significant happened. And in 2012 is when big tobacco really kind of started feeling threatened by these companies, by the vape industry and the vape companies. And so when a large company feels threatened by a little company, they tend to buy them out. And that's exactly what happened here. So it's important for our youth to know that the same people that sell, produce, distribute cigarettes are the same people that sell, produce, and distribute vapes. They're coming from the same umbrella. They're all owned by the same corporations and stuff now. So with that threat also came an opportunity, because big tobacco, their main motivator is money. And so they saw these as an opportunity to add a ton of nicotine to them into one device, because they couldn't put any more nicotine into a cigarette without making it fatter or changing it or anything like that. So if they purchased the vape industry, their goal was to drive up the nicotine content. So if you look in the far left there, cigarettes, a pack of cigarettes is about 22 to 36 milligrams of nicotine, where that first vape only had 3 to 6 milligrams of nicotine, and that's why it really didn't work as a smoking cessation device. But you can see when big tobacco got involved, it really massively jumped the nicotine level up to 36. That's the highest they could get without creating a throat burn or an irritation in the esophagus or in the mouth. It didn't matter what flavor it was. Juul hit the market in 2015, and they introduced us to a new type of nicotine, and that's called nicotine salts. So they took that plant-based nicotine off of the cigarettes that had been used in the vape so far, and they changed the chemical pH of that, which made it more tolerable, less burning. So they were able to get theirs up to 59 milligrams. And in 2019, Puff Bar introduced us to a brand new type of nicotine called synthetic nicotine, allowing them to, or enabling them to get their product up to 79 milligrams. So if you follow that across a pack of cigarettes, 22 to 36, and you look at that Puff Bar, you're looking at that one device has 2 to 3 times the amount of nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. And the scary thing for me is that they're telling us that a pack of cigarettes takes about 300 puffs to get through, where that Puff Bar is about 350 to 400 puffs. So you're taking the same time limit and doubling to almost tripling the amount of nicotine. So that's increasing time to addiction. Do you want me to go back? Okay. So time to addiction level here is, studies are showing that from the time a person first takes a drag on a cigarette, they're not inhaling it, but just kind of takes that first drag on a cigarette until they're fully addicted and smoking a pack a day is approximately 24 months. Because of the element and the large amount of nicotine in the vape products, that time to addiction is 6 to 9 months. So it's drastically increasing the addiction, and it's causing a deeper level of addiction with that. When we look at vape usage trends, this is a really interesting slide, because if we take the first column on the far left here, it's 2011 cigarette users. And if you look at that, you'll notice that the adults is about 20% of Americans are using, or excuse me, this is Iowa, sorry. About 20% of Iowa adults were using cigarettes in 2011 compared to 16% of Iowa youth. So not much difference, but if you fast forward to 2021, which is a 10-year difference, the adults dropped from the 20% down to the 16%, and the youth dropped all the way down to 3.5%. So it was a huge drop in those 10 years. But we also now have e-cigarette data with that on that 2021, and the e-cigarette data is showing us that the adults were at about 5% usage, where our teens were about at 16.5 to 17% usage. So I find it very interesting when you look at the 2021 data, the cigarette usage versus the vape usage, it kind of mirrors each other, which is really kind of reiterating the fact that vaping is more of a youth issue and a youth-drawn product than cigarette smoking is, or than it appeals to adults. This is a new chart here. It's going to be kind of busy, so we're just going to kind of stick with it. This was just released to us in November, but the big things I want you to kind of look at is the top items there, which is any tobacco product, and then the red item, which is our e-cigarettes, okay? So we're going to notice a huge increase right around like 2017, 2018, it's trending up. It really peaks in 2019, and then they start seeing it trending down in 2020. Do we have any guesses as to why or what substantial event happened in 2020 that would make these kind of trend down? COVID, yep, that's exactly right. So we're looking at COVID. Also, it's important to note that Juul's big lawsuit was in 2020 into 2021, which was the main device of teen use at that time. So they started banning the flavors in 2020 of Juul, which made it less available to our teens. Other products had not stepped in to fill that marketplace yet, so we think that there's a little bit of subsiding there as well too. But with COVID, our youth were stuck at home. They were constantly with their parents. They didn't have availability or able to get any of that. So this is middle school, same time period, middle school students. So once again, we're still seeing that trending up around 2017, 2018, really peaking in 2019. And then that huge drop down in 2020, same basic idea. So let's put these kind of side to side. Looking at high school versus middle school. As a parent or as an educator, is there anything that you particularly notice on these that are jumping at you? Yeah. So, exactly. So what our audience was telling us here is they're noticing that in high school, the e-cigarettes are trending down from 2022 to 2023, but yet in middle school, they're trending up. And that's exactly what we're finding as well too, is that we are dropping in high school use by about 2%, but unfortunately our middle school use is at an all-time high or close to an all-time high for these. And unfortunately, it looks like that's not slowing down anytime. So right now, that's a challenge to us as the adults, is we now have a big market that we need to work on prevention and education with. So I think we've seen a lot of good education happen in the high school. It's time to start challenging that into the middle school a little bit more. Okay, so why are youth using? There's 4 main reasons. The first one is peer pressure. And when it comes to peer pressure, we have to remember that our youth's peer pressure is different than the peer pressure that we experienced at their same age. And the main reason for that is number 2, social media influencers. So our peer pressure growing up were the people that we were around on a regular basis, our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, classmates, teammates, things of that nature. Here they have all that, but they also have these social media influencers. And did you guys know that Big Tobacco spends $1 million a day specifically targeting our youth on social media? So some of these people that are social media influencers are being paid by Big Tobacco to promote vaping products and to kind of like romanticize them a little bit and really empower that. So they're getting inundated by these social media influencers that they kind of believe are their peers as well too. The third reason, and this is a huge one too, is as a coping mechanism for mental health. So I think it's no secret that stress, anxiety, and depression are at an all-time high amongst our youth. A lot of our youth are starting to turn to self-medication by using tobacco and nicotine products such as vaping as coping mechanisms. And then the third one is the intense flavors. So just kind of a quick hit, no calorie hit of intense flavor is kind of what they're looking towards. So when it comes to nicotine and mental health, is our studies are showing us over and over again that when teens are consuming nicotine, especially while that brain development is happening, it's increasing irritability, mood changes, and anger outbursts. The likeliness of being diagnosed with depression as an adult for a teen that's using nicotine is twice as likely than a teen that did not use nicotine. So a decision they're making now can really stick through and impact them all the way through adulthood. It's also increased feelings of anxiety and really kind of multiplied those feelings of anxiety. And then it's creating what I like to kind of refer to, I'll call, is this mental health spiral. So maybe they're starting to use tobacco or nicotine products as a coping mechanism for mental health, but what's happening is like, say for instance, if they start using because their anxiety is here, it's gonna drop that anxiety for maybe about 4 minutes and it'll slowly start creeping back up, but it doesn't just meet where the anxiety was before, it exceeds it. So then they're tempted to hit again to get that dopamine drop, kind of similar to what Dr. Lee was talking about with the food. And it brings it down, but then it exceeds it. And so it creates this spiral. So now we have youth that maybe had periodic anxiety here, and they're at constant anxiety up here. And a lot of that is related to tobacco and nicotine use. The great news with this is within weeks to months of them quitting, their anxiety levels can decrease and come back to a normal level. Unfortunately, a lot of our youth are not tying the two and two together, that tobacco is related to anxiety or stress levels. Okay, nicotine and brain development. So the prefrontal cortex, which is highlighted up here in the red and yellow, is the last part of the youth brain to develop. And so it's kind of programming between the ages of 11 and 25 years old. And this is really important because statistically, we know that 99% of people that start using tobacco or nicotine products do so before the ages of 26. So when that prefrontal cortex isn't completely formed. And the prefrontal cortex development is impactful to this section of the slide over on the right here. So it's decision-making skills, impulse control, goal setting, regulating mood and emotions, social responses, maintaining attention, things of those natures. And unfortunately, when nicotine or other substances are consumed into that youth body between the ages of 11 and 25, it negatively impacts that growth and development, and that's an irreversible impact. So once again, a choice of being made as a teenager is going to impact them all the way through adulthood. So how addiction happens within the brain. We all have nicotine receptors in our brain. And when nicotine gets introduced into the brain, it binds to those receptors. So see on the screen here how we have the squares and then the triangles. And the triangles represent the nicotine, the squares are the receptors. And they bind and they fit together like a puzzle piece, okay? And so they're gonna stay connected there for a good 4 minutes. And in 4 minutes time period, our body can begin metabolizing and actually kind of get rid of nicotine out of our system. And so when that nicotine binds to those receptors, the receptors kind of like drop anchor within the brain and set up shop, and they're sitting here thinking, I'm here for the long haul. I don't need to go anywhere, okay? And so when that nicotine binds to that person may feel calm, they may feel satisfied, almost like a euphoric feeling, pleasured, energized, happy, focused, things of that nature. But unfortunately, the downside is when that dissipates and goes away, because those receptors have one job and one job only once that anchor is set up in that brain, and that's to call for nicotine. And they start off calling really, really quiet. And then they get louder and louder and louder. And when I work with youth, I kind of tell them too, those nicotine cravings, it's kind of almost like sitting in a hall like this, like a pep assembly, and all your peers are around you screaming, I want nicotine. Could you take a test in an environment like that, in a pep assembly, while everybody's screaming, I want nicotine? Probably not. So that's what addiction feels like in the brain, okay? And similar to what Dr. Lee was talking about with some of the food earlier is that tolerance can build up in that brain. So the more we use, the higher tolerance level we have, the more our body and our brain craves that nicotine in order to feel more normal. So I have teenagers that tell me they can't get out of bed in the morning without hitting their vape. To have something that can control their life so much that they physically can't put their feet on the floor and sit up until they hit their vape. That's addiction, okay? And so if people are addicted, they may need help to quit. This is not a willpower situation because of this binding, because of those receptors setting up shop in the brain. Their brain has been chemically rewired for dependency, particularly to addiction, or excuse me, particularly to nicotine. Okay, so it's more than a nicotine addiction. There's additional addictions like a habitual addiction of when I'm at this place or with these people, or getting out of bed in the morning or driving down the street, or I'm leaving school or I'm leaving work, I need this, okay? So sometimes we get that habitual addiction. Other times it's the addiction to the taste or the smell. Because we've heard, flavoring was one of the 4 reasons why our youth are turning to these. So they become addicted to that flavor or that taste, that smell that they're used to that comes off of their vape. Also the situation, the people that they're around, okay? And then the last one is as people. But like sometimes our people, they get so used to having something in their hand. And think of it too, like if you have a teenager at home, can they function if you take their phone away from them? Even if it's not physically out in their hand, if it's in their pocket and they can't feel it on their body, can they function? So we have youth that go through that same thing with that nicotine, that vape addiction, that having that security blanket removed from them just totally just takes over their brain and they just can't truly function with that. So like I said, it's more than that chemical addiction. There's a lot more that we need to treat with that too. I also want to bring awareness to a target market. So our youth, specifically 12 to 17-year-olds, are being strategically targeted by big tobacco. But in addition to our youth, we have other sub-communities that are being targeted. Our mental health community. So at least 40% of cigarettes that are purchased and consumed in the United States are done so with people that have mental health diagnosis. 40%, okay? Females. Strategically get promoted to females. LGBTQ are twice as likely to use tobacco and nicotine products than their straight peers. Specific races, so our African American population as well as our Latino or Hispanic population. They're specifically targeted, and in certain racial communities, big tobacco will actually lower the prices of these products within the communities to entice them into purchasing a little bit more. And then also our lower educated as well as lower income families and individuals as well too. So in addition to be completely targeted, these groups also have another huge thing in common. They're more likely to use menthol products, and menthol products are statistically at least twice as hard to quit than traditional tobacco products, because it creates that coolness in the throat, allowing them to take in more nicotine, making it harder to quit. And that's not a coincidence that these targeted people are also more likely to use those menthol products. Also, these targeted populations are more likely to fall into that mental health category as well too. So kind of keep those things in mind. It's not an accident. They're being specifically targeted. So is vaping just harmless water vapor? For years, if you guys think about when vape commercials were actually on standardized TV, we were constantly told it's just harmless water vapor and flavor. Honestly, until I started doing this job about 2 years ago, I kind of thought the same thing. And then you read the research, and the actual documented research, and it is not harmless water vapor. It never ever has been. That was just a marketing ploy to trick people into believing that it was safe. So every vape is going to have nicotine. Even if it's marked as nicotine-free, there's still going to be some elements of nicotine in it. They all have 60+ cancer-causing substances. 9 of them are pictured over here. They're going to have things like heavy metals, as well as these ultrafine particles, which are these small particles that are exclusive to the vape aerosol. So once again, since the vape industry is only about 16, 17 years old, we've only been able to study these for about 16 years. But what we do know with them is that they're the smallest particles, and they're able to get into the deepest, darkest crevices of our lungs, and they just hang out there. What they do from there, we really don't know. It's still too early in time to find the long-term effects of that. And then the flavoring. So they use flavors that are been approved by our government, like our FDA, for us to eat or drink. So to go into candy, to go into pop, things of that nature. They've never ever been approved for us to inhale, and especially heat and inhale. Okay, so now we're taking flavors that are okay to go into our stomach, not even the best, because really is candy or pop the best thing? Having any sort of chemical flavoring, is that really the best thing in our stomach? No, but they're telling us it's still okay. Now this is getting heated and put into the lungs. And sometimes kids are having a hard time really understanding that, so when I work with them, a lot of times I try talking to them too about, there's something I consume every single day, totally safe to go down my throat and end up in my stomach. But the moment I put any of it in my lungs, it's gonna make me cough, and if I get too much of it in my lungs, it could kill me. What is it? Water, okay? So we kind of think of it like this. What does too much of this artificial flavoring in our lungs do? We don't really know, but too much of anything that's not air in our lungs can be very detrimental, okay? So one of the flavors is diacetyl. It's in about 80% of the vapes on the market right now. That's directly linked to popcorn lung, which is an irreversible lung condition found in popcorn factory workers. Okay, so vaping in the lungs, the other things we need to take into consideration is it's increasing inflammation and irritation within the lungs, which is then damaging the air sacs, creating shortness of breath. So a lot of times when I talk to youth, we talk about their sports or their music. Can they have an athletic performance with shortness of breath? No. Can they sing? Can they do that? It's also reducing that immune system function and response within those lungs, which means they're more likely to get sick with respiratory illnesses like COVID, influenza, bronchitis, pneumonia, things of that nature, which once again is taking them out of activities that they love. When it comes to the heart, these things that have to do the heart, research is showing them vaping related, but when you look at them, they have the exact same issues we're seeing with smoking. So the heart condition is not really a smoking or a vaping thing, it's a nicotine thing. So something to be aware of as well too, increased risk of blood clots, heart rate, blood pressure. So especially in our youth, we're seeing a resting elevated heart rate of maybe like 120 beats per minute just sitting still. So FYI, that's what maybe your heart rate's gonna be at when you've ran a mile. Okay, but as they're sitting at their desk or just sitting still, 120 beats per minute. Stiff blood vessels and decreased circulation, particularly in our youth, cold hands and feet. So how are they getting these? Parents. Some parents are purchasing them for their kids, believing that if they come from them, it's a safe alternative. They're gonna do it anyways, might as well supply them. Peers or older kids. The scary thing with this is them getting them from what's called an informal source, like a peer or an older kid. Statistically, a middle schooler, that vape is more likely to go through 3 to 5 people's hands before it would end up in that middle schooler's hand, usually out of the package, able to be tampered with. So things like THC, marijuana, meth, fentanyl are being added to these products and ending up in the hands of 5th, 6th, 7th graders. Crazy thing is, the device doesn't change. The smell doesn't change. The color doesn't change. There's no alarm that goes off and says, warning, this now has meth in it or anything like that. The only way to find out that something has been added or tampered to it is to use it and people get sick. And then the third reason we're seeing more and more of these is other adults. So they are doing them in exchange for services, babysitting, lawn care, snow removal, and the adults are offering to pay them in vapes or the kids are asking to be paid in vapes rather than cash. So we have some more education that we need to do adult-wise, getting them to understand that there are a lot of dangers to our youth by these. Formal sources would be things like local vape shops or gas stations. A lot of these tend to be smaller. They tend to be under-regulated. Maybe they're not IDing them, things of that nature. And then online. So unfortunately in the state of Iowa, tobacco is different than alcohol. So like if you were to order alcohol online and have it shipped to your house, you have to have somebody with a valid 21-year-old ID receive it and sign for it. Tobacco does not require that. So some of them are ordering them online, using gift cards or parents' credit cards unbeknownst to them, taking their ID, entering in their ages and things of that nature, and then setting the email address as their own so they get the alerts of when they're being distributed. So just something to kind of keep your eye on as well too. How are they stashing them or hiding them? So they're stashing and concealing them. Here's extremely popular ways that we are seeing. So long sleeves, up the sleeve. So they're just holding it in the sleeve. They'll hit it in class through one and maybe exhale it into the other sleeve. Pants, particularly that rim of the pant, there's kind of a lip there, or some of them are putting extra pockets into that section of the pant. Hats, so inside the lip of like a baseball cap or a flipped up like kind of beanie. Hoodie pockets. So once again, sewing in extra pockets or kind of like a little hidden section in the hoodie. Shoes, and the females are doing like their bras as well too. Community vapes is what they call them. Those might be hidden in a like school bathroom or in a public bathroom somewhere. Most popular places are like in the back of the toilet or underneath the toilet, somewhere in there. Toilet paper and paper towel dispensers, as well as ceiling tiles. Where they'll pop up a ceiling tile, put it in there, and then everybody knows that that's where it's at and they can go find it. How to conceal them. They're looking like everyday products, okay? So all of these are available online. The first one is a smartwatch. That's actually a vape. So I believe that was $50 online. The next one is a hooded sweatshirt. the vape goes right inside here, and that hooded sweatshirt drawstring is actually the vape mouthpiece. So they can vape on that without even picking the vape out. Down in the corner here, that's an amendment to a cell phone case. So turning it into a vape where it holds the e-juice there. And next to that is a backpack. So think of like those hydro backpacks with like the waters in them, but now it's a vape instead of the hydration. The next ones there, that actually were, those are vapes. They are about 6 to 7 inches tall. These were confiscated by another school that I work with. They're beverage flavored and they look like little Slurpee cups or like a preschool toddler sippy cup type thing. There's working pencil, working highlighters, and then that top one there is like a Sharpie that is hollowed out. So the outside of it works, but then you can pull it apart and it can fit other things in it. So they have easy ability to conceal things by making them look like everyday objects, especially working everyday objects. So just a warning to everybody out there is same device. So if I was to tell you one of these devices up here contained meth in it, one of them was nicotine only, one had THC and nicotine, and one had just THC in it, would you be able to tell them apart? No. And our kids can't either, okay? So just kind of as a caution to you guys there, if you're ever somewhere and you stumble upon a vape, remember that nicotine and other products can be absorbed through the skin. So I would encourage you to consider using like a gloved hand or whatever like that because it could leak out. You could absorb that and end up having some effects as well too. So signs your child might be vaping. Changes in behavior. Maybe they're reducing their caffeine use because for some people the high levels of nicotine in these products can make them a little bit shaky and edgy. So caffeine on top of that can really compound that. They experience frequent nosebleeds, and they have an unstable mood, just way more than what your regular teenager is going to be up and down. They have unusual USB chargers because especially the reusable vapes are going to have a different charger with it. And I do have some that I did bring to kind of show you guys what some of the more popular ones we're seeing are. Different school supplies. So as we saw up on one of the previous screens or slides up there is school supplies that are actually working. Well, if it's stuff that you didn't buy or you don't recognize, double check it out. It may be an actual vape as well too. Disposable devices or pods in the trash, packaging in the trash, and the biggest one is unusual smells, especially sweet smells. So remember the flavors that our teens are drawn to a lot and the ones that they're being marketed with are like dessert flavors, candy flavors, soda flavors, things of that nature, or the minty flavors. So those are the ones that they're really kind of drawn to. Rooms or clothing are going to be the biggest ones that you're going to notice these things in. So our call to action, what can we as adults do? The first thing is to share the truth. So we've talked for years, as I said in one of the first couple of slides, we've talked for years about the dangers of tobacco. Let's start adding the word nicotine into that danger conversation and the risk. Because I think most of the schools I work with, when they talk about confiscating things or catching kids or whatever, and the conversations they have with them, they're told time and time again, but it's not dangerous, it's not tobacco, it's tobacco free, it's just nicotine. Nicotine still has a lot of harms. That's the addiction property of the tobacco. Warn them about nicotine and not just tobacco. Help them with mental health. So that's one of the huge, more consistent reasons why we're finding that youth are using is coping with anxiety, stress, or depression. We treat them, we teach healthy, productive coping mechanisms, and this doesn't become as much of a concern anymore. Empower cessation, because guess what? If our youth aren't using at all, they're not using at school. So when we empower cessation, we make it an option for them to quit. We support them in quitting. We cheer them on. We be their advocate and their support system. Then we can start changing those health effects, okay? And then we want to consider grace and seek to understand. Because how many of us really truly understood what's exactly in a vape? If we as adults don't know it, how can we expect our youth to know it? Okay, so if they have peers that are telling them, you have stress, you have anxiety, use this, it will help. So let's give them a little bit of grace, seek to understand what is the real reason why they're using. Is this the first time? Is it a singular situation? Are they addicted? What started it? What's propelling it? Those kinds of things. So seek the real reason. Okay? And hopefully, information that you learned today during this presentation can really help with this call to action for sharing that truth and information. So if you have teens that are addicted to tobacco and nicotine products, we have a free program for 12 to 17-year-olds. It's called My Life, My Quit. They can start off by texting Start My Quit. They can go online to mylifemyquit.com. This is a 100% free program. Now, I'm a parent, so this next part is kind of hard for me to say. It's taken me some soul searching, but I really, really support it. It's 100% confidential. So if one of our teens self-reports into this program, they do not contact the school, they do not contact the parents. So as a parent, I found that a little bit hard. I'm like, if my 12-year-old was vaping, I would want to know. But at the same time, I also had to realize it doesn't matter who helps them and it doesn't matter how they stop. It matters that they got the help they needed. So whether that was through me or not through me, okay? So My Life, My Quit does not do any medication. It does not do any nicotine replacement therapy because once again, they're under the age of 18. And these amazing professionals at this organization, they have one goal and one goal only. And that is to help that youth on the other end of their line be the best version of themselves that they can be. And I think that's all we really want for our youth, right? The next one is for 18 and over. This is Quitline, Iowa. Once again, free, completely confidential. The only difference here is Quitline, Iowa, since it's 18 or over, will prescribe a minimum of 2 weeks of nicotine replacement therapy for absolutely free. And if the person is underinsured or doesn't have insurance, they will help work with your medical professional to make sure that that can continue on to increase the likeliness that you will stay quit. Okay, because research is showing us time and time again, when you mix one-on-one counseling and support with medication or nicotine replacement therapy, the chances that they are quit and that they stay quit for 6 months plus a year, those kinds of things are substantially higher. So we want to see that success rate. Quitline Iowa offers additional programs. So it is behavioral health. So if somebody's in that category, they're actually going to get greater levels of assistance, more points of contact. Pregnancy, so pre or postnatal. The teen, which is the My Life, My Quit we just went over with. Young adult, that's kind of like the 18 to 24 range. And then American Indian, Alaskan Native. So all of those qualify for additional services. And just like with the My Life, My Quit, these can be phone calls, these can be text messages, these can be emails, they can be online chat, they can be a mixture of those, okay? They also will send you random comments and methods of support. So I had a lady tell me that she's been quit for 5 years and she still gets random text messages and emails from Quitline, and she goes, I love it because it just is reinforcing, and they're kind of like great cheerleaders with that. So additional resources here. I did a handout from the CDC, and it is called, so if anybody online would like this, it's called Know the Risks. If you go on to CDC.org and you search up Know the Risks, e-cigarettes in young people. It's subtitled Talk with Your Teens About E-Cigarettes, a tip sheet for parents. So those are available online. Great free resource, covers some of the information we went on today as well as additional resources. And then there's truthinitiative.org, really, really great research on there as well too, 100% thoroughly vetted as far as making sure that they're not skewed by like big tobacco funding any research and things of that nature. So that is my presentation for today. I'm open to questions. If anybody has any questions, comments, or concerns, additional information that you would like.
You have extras. Would you be willing to let us keep some in the office?
Absolutely. So Mr. Hertz just asked if we had extras of these parent information guides, if they could take them into the office and parents could stop by. So absolutely. If you're watching online from home, you are definitely more than welcome. Just the high school office, or do you want middle school and high school availability?
We'll do both.
And they'll be available in both offices. Thank you so much. Yeah. Any other questions? So that's a really great question. Her question is Quitline just for Iowa or is it for other states? So I believe there's 28 states that follow the Quitline program, and Quitline is from National Jewish Hospital, so it's completely vetted and highly educated group of professionals. Iowa has their own link to that, so we have our own support and stuff because part of that subsidy is covered by the master settlement agreement. The lawsuit that Big Tobacco has to pay out year after year after year for the issues that their false advertising and cigarette smoking caused. So I don't know if you remember the master settlement agreement. It was settled in like the late 90s. I want to say like 97, 98. So Iowa has funding for that every year, and they help cover the cost of that. So Nebraska has their own Quitline. It's all tied to the same thing. So our website is the quitlineiowa.org, but if you even do the 1-800 number, or going onto the website, it's going to put you into the national registration and you're dealing with people directly from that organization. It's just the funding comes from Iowa. Great question though. I know earlier before we started, I had one of the questions is, we have youth tell us all the time, they started using because everybody else was. So what's our national statistic? If we have youth that tell us, oh, I'm doing it because everybody's doing it. Do we know what it is? It's 14.1% of the youth population of middle schoolers and high schoolers, which in the United States equals about 2.8 million. So when you break that down, for every one middle schooler or high schooler that's vaping on a regular basis, you have 6 that are not. So the crowd is on the not side than on the yes side. Yeah.
What's the trend of those numbers? Do you see it increasing?
That is a great question. I'm going to come back to this one slide just for 1 second, because I know we had a couple people add in to the program while we were underway here. So I'm going to take us back just to the trend slide here, and we'll get that answered for you. So this is recent data that was just released to us in November, and this is high school. So it tracked from 2011 to 2023. We saw a huge increase in 2017, 2018, really peaking in 19 with a fall in 2020, and that fall was related to what again? COVID. They were locked at home with their parents. They didn't have access to it. Their friends weren't around. Mom and dad was around all the time. So we saw that first initial trend there. It was then supported by the fact that Juul was sued and lost their flavors, and there wasn't really a subsidy to come into that teen market right away there. So that's kind of what trended down for 2020, 2021. They started moving back up. If you notice by looking at overall tobacco products and e-cigarettes for high school, from 2022 to 2023, we're starting to trend down again. Which is part of what has dropped the youth use by 1% or 1.5% to 2%, I think it is, across the United States. Unfortunately, our middle school is a little bit different. So we're seeing peaks similar, a greater valley, which once again, lack of access to it. But unfortunately, from 2022 to 2023, we're seeing a trend up in that middle school use. Which kind of what we talked about earlier is that's showing that a lot of our prevention efforts and education efforts that we did in high school are starting to work. We also know that a lot of our high schoolers, ones that have been using for a while, have started making the mental health connection about the spiral, and then it's actually elevating the levels and feelings of anxiety, stress, and depression. And so stopping it is allowing them to cope and get a handle on the mental health a little bit more. So in addition to it escalating it, we also know that nicotine use has a negative impact on those mental health medications. So people that are prescribed mental health medications, it's changing how our body metabolizes them and actually uses them, so it's making a lot of mental health medications not as effective or impactful, which can be dangerous as well too. So does that answer your question? So, yeah. I know it's an unfortunate thing. I think we just need to start working on getting some programs in, which the state of Iowa does have a new program. It's called Let's Make Healthy Choices. It's for 4th and 5th graders specifically. that we do that, and it's just kind of a basic intervention and a little introduction, like what is tobacco, what is nicotine, what is vaping, why do you think people do this, why do you think people don't do this, what are some of the risks, like that kind of stuff. So it's just opening up the conversation and planting the seed before they get the other seed planted. So, any other ones? Okay, well, if anybody online that's watching this has a question, they can either go back into my email address and send me that directly, or as I said before, Mrs. Earl has my email and we're in contact quite a bit, so you can reach out to her and she can always forward something on to me. I'm happy to answer any questions. In addition to the youth prevention and education, we also work with organizations to get like your no smoking, no vaping, no chewing, and tobacco-free, nicotine-free ground signage up. We do adult education on all aspects. We do youth education. So if you ever have a need, whether it's business, organization, or anything related, please feel free to reach out and we'll get you the resources and try to work with you or accommodate you as much as we possibly can. So I thank everybody so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.